Rachel Swanson has become one of the top voices changing the fertility conversation. She's a dietitian, researcher, and author of the new book, Trying, a Science-Backed Plan to Optimize Your Fertility. She works with everyone from pro athletes to Vogue models and Fortune 500 execs, and she's reframing fertility as a sign of vitality, not just reproduction. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, it's so nice to be here with you.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. We were just talking a little bit before the podcast, and I said, we just have to press record because I'm doing the podcast with you before the podcast. But
And I'm glad you said that, by the way, or else we would have kept going.
oh, totally. I was feeling like we were going to talk for an hour before the podcast, but so we'll just do this with the listeners listening, and everyone can participate. But I was telling you, it's been a minute since we've had any sort of fertility conversation on this podcast, and I went through my own fertility journey. I think that was back in 2018 and 2019. I was trying to freeze my eggs, had an unsuccessful 2-round attempts. But my experience with that felt a little bit harsh and scientific and cold. And so when you were brought to me, it was a refreshing objective on fertility. And I really wanted to bring that to the listeners because we do talk a lot about root causes, overall health, diving into spirituality and emotional connections with your health. And so I just really feel like what you're talking about is very in line with that. So I know you talk about fertility 2.0, and that's kind of like an overriding conversation for all of the work that you do. Can you explain to the listeners what that means?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think, first, I mean, look, I'll talk about fertility 2.0 for an hour all day, but I guess I'll tell you a little bit of the backstory and how I arrived, because I think what you'll find is it aligns your what you just experienced, the coldness, the harshness,
Hmm.
the clinical aspect. It actually aligns with what I view a lot of times going on with practice. So I guess to give you context and backstory for a minute, for context, I do work full time in clinical practice. I've been doing that since 2017. I guess you can kind of think of me as I think of myself as really a conduit to help people achieve their goals through natural ways, being, diet and lifestyle. So over the years, more and more women came to me with the goal of getting pregnant. And yes, so what was interesting about this is that, all these women were quite successful, business professionals. They had already achieved so much in life, but yet they were presenting, feeling completely disempowered about the
Hmm.
whole process, about themselves, about what they were going through. And they had either received, coming with me, they either received super generic advice.
Hmm.
They were kind of playing whack-a-mole with their symptoms. Overall, it just felt cold and very reactive. And now this is ironic, not just because I'm saying, oh, they had all this earlier success, but it's like if you take a step back and think about it, this should be one of the most exciting times. Like you're here wanting to and hoping to create this miracle of life inside your body, but instead you're feeling like your body is the adversary. It's like working against you,
100%.
right? So
Yes.
I think so really what I did for all of my clients is I took this what I call a first principles approach to their goal. That just means kind of looking at reproductive function, not in an isolated way, but kind of from this root cause based
Hmm.
perspective, like what you're speaking to. That root cause based perspective, that first principle approach, that is fertility 2.0 because it takes into consideration your whole body. It's proactive in nature. It's just a very, very different approach from kind of this conventional medicine or kind of the traditional advice that you're given. Because I look at like how can we optimize how the body functions, but in doing so, improve your chances of conceiving if that's in the cards for you, right? But also just set yourself up for success
Right.
for the rest of our lives. And professionally, that did kind of lead me to this crossroads where I was either going to kind of go back to school for more education to pursue my PhD, or I could spend kind of the equivalent time and research on a book to kind of get more of this information, out to women sort of outside of the practice. And I mean, Kelly, I think if I didn't do that, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
No. Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you brought up the generic nature of how fertility is discussed because I find it to be something that should be so personal, it's individual. And that's what you talk about, is looking at each individual person as a different, not experiment, what out of patient, I guess, whatever the word would be in that world, but as a different situation. And how do we approach this for your specific body? Because I remember going into my gynecologist, and at 35, they're starting to tell you, like, you'll be in a geriatric pregnancy. And I'm like, what does that even mean? I feel like I'm 35. Why am I getting talked to that way? And then it was kind of just a little bit like a cattle call going into the egg freezing situation. And because it wasn't successful, it wasn't like anyone was talking to me about the whys other than my age, but I was 37. So it doesn't feel like it was really, there wasn't any like deep dive into maybe what my specific blocks were, anything like that. And so I really appreciate your approach to looking at the whys, talking about the food we're eating, and creating the holistic just environment in our bodies for optimal health overall, right? Like hormones and all of that. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, exactly. And the process definitely, like, that the process of egg retrieval to IVF, that certainly will kind of feel very, cold, clinical, but I want people to go into that actually with profound self-confidence because they were empowered with information about their body beforehand. And actually, it's not about like what I didn't do or what I did do. It's about like, no, you have the information. You absolutely took care of your body and optimized it to the extent possible. I mean, like, what is more empowering than that, right? But without any of that, understanding the why, understanding your body and how your body
Mm-hmm.
works, it's kind of like you're just either do nothing, you do kind of like a one sheet of information that they gave you beforehand, or you're going to be like stuck in Google searches and like Reddit threads at 2 a.m. trying to like piece together all of the pieces. And I can only
Yeah.
imagine after this process for you is when you started doing that. I'm only guessing, and taking this sort of like
Yes.
looking at the holistic picture, actually looking at the spiritual elements, right? And kind of bringing all of this together. But I mean, I just wish that you had what you have right now
Mm-hmm.
going into the journey. Would you say
Too.
that that probably would have, even if the outcome was the same, wouldn't have that
Exactly.
made your life experience a whole lot different, kind of
Yeah.
before and after? But I mean, you speak to that. That's your journey.
Well, completely. And that's why I'm so grateful for books like yours coming out now, because I do think it's a conversation that we don't really have until we get to the place of going through the process. And like I said, I was 35. At 35, I don't think many women are really, if you're a high achieving woman who's very work driven, you probably are just like, okay, I got to really start thinking about this. And you mentioned that you worked with a lot of successful women. And that was how I felt at the time, was like my business was booming. I had gotten to a place in my career where I felt satisfied and like, okay, yes, time is ticking. I need to think about the family thing because I know the biological clock is ticking. And also, I felt very disempowered in this one area of my life because I didn't have the knowledge about my body that I probably needed to have. And also, I had always known how to work hard to achieve the things I wanted. And this was a thing that I was like, I don't even know what to do. Like I didn't know anything I could be doing to help myself achieve my goals. And that's weird. Like you just kind of are like, the doctor says go to this appointment, so you go. But yeah, you're right. Like I've researched a ton after, and now reflecting back, I'm like, oh, I could have done this or that or that or looked into this. And so yeah, I think it's
Well, then
interesting.
it's like, to your point, you go on this journey of like afterwards, this self doubt. You
Yes,
probably either have challenges or questions with like sense of identity or sense of self, and
100%.
hopefully, yeah, and hopefully I'm not projecting
No, that's exactly what
onto
it's
you, but
like.
it's more like this is kind of, these are just like the emotions I'm experiencing from
Yeah.
other women, right? And it's like, well, several things, and we'll certainly kind of go back to the holistic approach and how we can support our body, and just my feelings in general, how things need to be sort of proactive.
Yeah.
We need to set women up for success, especially for a goal that's really a lifelong goal. It's, and you just may not have you may not have focused on it beforehand. And like you said,
Mhm.
like at least the people in my practice absolutely are not focusing on performance. They're like,
Yeah.
building their life, right? And
Yeah.
doing all these other things. But I guess in terms of, I hate that in general, it's like all of the disappointment, all the negative emotions you feel after, it's kind of taking a step back. This is a mismatch between expectations and reality, right?
Hmm.
That's all it is. And I think maybe, at least for some of my women, maybe for you, maybe not for you, that's what people need to recognize faster and sooner is that that is only one version of reality that you can play out. And look, if someone has the goal of building a family, like, why is that? Well, it's probably because, that you just want to be around people that you love for the longest time possible on this planet. So in hopes that everyone can pursue their passions and purpose while on this earth. But again, it's like there's so many ways to achieve that if that's the
Hmm.
goal. And so again, I just kind of wanted to take a step back because we have to like reframe what's going on and all of these emotions. It's really just going to cloud your path forward. Right. It's going to be very conflicting with seeing things with clarity, and taking the next step in building that goal.
Yeah. Well, I know you describe fertility as a vital sign, like it just, even equatable to like your heart rate or blood pressure. So, can you unpack maybe like how we do this perspective shift? Because I don't think that that is how anyone is thinking about it at this point. And so, what got you to that kind of thinking, and how do we shift our own narrative about that?
Yeah. So this is just what I view for any health condition or this goal. So that perspective and that frame of mind. And you're right. And look, I'm going to be honest. This is exactly why I wrote the book, because I'm like, why is this not the standard, right?
100%.
In terms
Yes.
of looking at this, because just the more and more research that I found, it's just showing that it's like, look, all of these sort of vital signs that we monitor over time, none of them is fertility. But this goes for men and women. Think about the men. If there's issues with, say, sperm, quantity or quality, that's actually giving you a much earlier indicator that something is likely not going the way that it should. And at least my job, is to help find and unblock what's holding the body back from achieving its highest potential in this case, right? Or so again, that's just how I look at it. Like, where can we really optimize the body so it can function as it's intelligently designed to do? And
Mm.
I guess I do want to point out really fast, nothing I said will apply, of course, to individuals who, like a male who has, varicocele. That's just basically something that you need to go see a urologist for, completely fixable, right? So that can also lead to sperm challenges. And for females, like, look, nothing I'd help you with is going to help if you have, say, a tubal blockage. Like, that is based off of
Sure.
your anatomy. And so
Right.
I did want to kind of set the stage, because I think everything is sort of like, oh, we're against the system. It's like, right, all this, but I'm like, no, like there's time and place for both. So, but going back to what you're mentioning, this is just how I believe the standard of care should be, where we can look at fertility as an indicator to what is going on with our health. And is
Mhm.
there an opportunity to optimize this in order to achieve the goal? And that's absolutely the case. So we look at sort of unblocking these biological hurdles, and that will optimize your chances of conceiving. And I have over really 400 studies in the book proving that.
Yeah. Let's get into some of those because I think it's interesting. We've mentioned there's obviously the root cause, and then physically and emotionally and energetically, I know there's a lot to fertility there as well. And so maybe we can touch on some of that. But your framework really looks at the full system. And that's what I love about it. One of the things that I was fascinated by was gut health and like oral health and all of those those pieces of it because I don't really think people are connecting the two. There was one thing you said about our partner's oral hygiene. really can matter in fertility. Can you tell us why? Because I did not see that coming.
Yeah. So I'm taught this. I remember distinctly like this specific bullet point I think I had in the oral health section. Because the people that we are with and, our
Yeah.
partners, there's this microbial like transfer. And I think I was like, this, the whole, you are who you spend time with is kind of takes
Yes.
on this entire new meaning because there's a transfer of microbes. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's like you could be doing all the things needed to optimize your oral health. And I'll get into why that's important. But if your partner is doing none of it, I'm like, no, this has to be a shared effort because then it's kind of like all the work that you're doing, but then, you're with him and you're,
Yeah.
kissing and things like that. And you're like having this microbial transfer, some of which, not all, some of which kind of take up residence in your mouth. And so the whole underlying theme of the entire book, like, yes, it's geared to women, of course, but every single chapter and every single section basically has a part about the male counterpart, right? And what
But
can
it
they
makes
do?
sense. I mean, because we all talk about it as the woman needs to do all this stuff, but it's like, okay, well, there's also sperm in making a child. So like that is a big piece. There is an exchange of all of these I don't know the technical terms. I'll just
No,
say fluids.
microbes and yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And but the same goes for, I mean, I don't know if you want to get into this too, but the same goes for vaginal health too, right? I
Sure.
mean, it's
Yeah.
all of this kind of microbial transfer, and just
Right.
think of all these microbes on different places of your body. These are ecosystems, and you don't want a power imbalance happening in any of those ecosystems
Right.
because it's not going to support you in the best way possible. But I mean, I guess, so take a step back. We'll look at kind of the overarching goal of why I have an entire chapter just on the microbiome, not just the gut, but, oral microbiome, for example.
Hmm.
But all of these, think of these, each of these ecosystems as reproductively relevant. And so, they are going to help either support you, or if they're out of balance, like there's a power imbalance happening between sort of these opportunistic bacteria and your good bacteria, what that's creating is this inflammatory cascade that can happen in the body that ultimately can impact clinical outcomes, meaning chances of conceiving. And it is fascinating. And
Hmm.
I needed to bring all of this research to Wibbit because I doubt they know about it. And guess what? The reason I put it in the book isn't just to talk about it. I'm like, no, you can leverage diet and lifestyle changes to optimize every ecosystem in your body. Like, what's more incredible and powerful than that? That's how we improve our chances. And sort of this microbiome aspect, that is one of the root cause levers that you have in your power. Like, it's incredible.
So why would your oral microbiome matter in fertility?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure people are like, wait, what? That's your mouth. Why does that matter in how your fertility operates?
I love this reaction so much. So with your oral health, if you have, let's say, poor oral health, and then going a step further to what's called, periodontal disease, about half of the population in the US has periodontal disease, which actually is a stat that blew me away. I
Me
think I read the
too.
paper about 3 times. So I'm like, no, this is no way.
Right.
Periodontal disease, which, think of it like inflammation in your mouth. This is gum disease, right? So
Okay.
there's a lot of there's dysbiosis, which basically means an imbalance of the microbiota in your mouth. There's inflammation going on. There's a lot of inflammatory things happening in the mouth. What can happen with that? Are you familiar with kind of this term leaky gut?
Yes.
Okay, so I like to describe it this way, and you'll see why. What happens is sort of for two reasons. One, those microbes can actually go like hitch a ride in your bloodstream, right? Because they
Mhm.
seep through. Just visualize kind of the leaky gut. What happens? That can happen in your mouth. And all of this then goes systemically, which is why it's not everything going on in your mouth isn't just about your mouth. It can actually happen throughout the body. So basically, you have the microbes that can hitch a ride in your bloodstream. that can also cause inflammation and induce your immune system to respond. I mean, think about your immune system. It's like, hey, these microbes literally belong in the mouth. What the
Mhm.
heck are they doing here? That's why your body kind of mounts this inflammatory response. And if I may, I know this kind of is going to segue here to a different subject, but even if you're listening to this and you are not trying to get pregnant, everything I'm saying right now is relevant in other ways. So
Mhm.
in terms of the translocation of this pathogenic bacteria that is now associated with the higher risk of certain cancer types, they have found this in the plaque in the brain. They have found this in plaque and heart. All of these are associations, but they are becoming very, very strong associations. So again, I just want to, we'll zoom out, we'll kind of zoom in and zoom out on every
Yeah.
topic we discuss, but I have to say this is relevant for your entire lifetime. And I'm just kind of bringing this forward in context of fertility because periodontal disease has been shown to increase preterm birth, miscarriage, and chances of conceiving. Wild, isn't it?
That is, I'm like mind blown. When you
Yeah.
said over half the population,
Yeah.
is that what that is insane.
And so with this, I guess I don't want anyone to extrapolate that I'm saying like, well, 50% of the
Yeah.
population therefore is going to be less likely to conceive. That's certainly not scientifically accurate. But the reason I say that this is a massive leverage point in the population. Same
Yeah.
with metabolic health, same with everything else I discussed. And so I kind of just wanted to bring that to light. That we
Well,
could be
yeah.
doing a lot. And think about it. Oral health is one of the easiest. It's like in my mind, this is the lowest hanging fruit, Kelly. It's
Absolutely.
like the lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah. And if it's one of those things, like, I don't think that we would associate the reason I was so mind blown by that stat is I would just never associate that with fertility. And I do think it's a very important conversation to have about all these different places in our body, in our gut, in our vaginal health. And we'll talk about that in a second. But like your mouth, I would never think, oh, that is really important for me and my overall health or my fertility or anything like that. You just think about it with, okay, I need to go to the dentist every 6 months or a year or whatever, you know? So I think it's just an interesting one to connect our health and these different microbiomes in general. And the fact that so many people are not looking at that, of course, it's contributing to our overall health issues probably in our society.
Yeah, and this is it's entirely and by the way, I will be a broken record on this point. I will probably say it 10 times until we're done, but this is something that everyone can leverage. We cannot
Right.
leverage our age at the end of the day, which you
Right.
spoke to at the beginning. So
Yeah.
they're like, there are factors we absolutely cannot control, but this is one of them. It's the lowest hanging fruit.
Mhm.
So that's why kind of this is feeding into our how we started this conversation, right? About like, no, I want people to be so empowered about their bodies and like and
Yeah.
bring that sort of confidence into this whole journey. Like I'm supporting my body in the best way possible, right?
Right.
Supporting the life inside of my body. If you want to kind of bring it back into this bigger picture. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what getting pregnant is, right? It's being able to support life. But I'm kind of giving you an opportunity that you can support the life of these ecosystems, of these microbes
Mhm.
inside your body way before then. Something that you can think about and that you'll never forget this is so, and I should have probably said this at the beginning. I got way too excited clearly about the science. Think about also, I describe it like leaky gut, but you can also think about the mouth in a way that you know how sometimes if you've ever taken like a sublingual vitamin like B12 and you like squirt it under your tongue or you
Mhm.
let something dissolve under your tongue. Okay, so the mouth highly vascularized and it literally like takes in all of these things that gets absorbed into the bloodstream. Think about B12. That's a way to like bypass the oral route is just to go right under the tongue, and that increases your B12 levels, right? So
Right.
think about that in terms of like, wow, that is literally affecting systemic B12. We just aren't. It's just not. We aren't taught to think about or have had the information to think that's what's also happening with different
Mhm.
inflammatory molecules or microbes or this sort of thing. The same, if you want to kind of go to the vaginal health side, you can think about this in the exact same way. So for other women, so not for fertility, but An example from clinical practice, this of course isn't me prescribing, it's one of our physicians. They might prescribe a woman, say, vaginal estrogen for maybe like
Hmm.
vaginal dryness or something like
Hmm.
this, depending on the time point in their life. Why are we putting it there? Because that area is highly vascularized. It's literally takes up right these hormones, and so um, think about this in relation to all of the synthetic things that we are putting down there to strip our microbiome away and strip these layers away that is meant to protect us, and putting sort of again all of these endocrine disrupting chemicals down there, which have hormone effects, just like hormones. So again, it's
Right.
just a much, much bigger picture, has massive relevance outside fertility as well.
Well, speaking of all of the foreign substances and objects that we're putting down there, I mean, every month I'm putting tampons,
Yeah.
using tampons. Or then what about like lube? And how is that possibly disrupting our vaginal microbiome?
I think a lot of things are unfortunately disrupting it. Not everything has been studied, of course. But for example, lube. Yes, I think about that. And I really, really think it's very important to, if you're trying to conceive, for example, we need to have a lube that is not going to be harsh to our microbiome. It's like we're
Right.
literally putting chemicals right on for a different feel. Like
Yeah.
that is not helping in any way. So we really have to look at that. And of course, for fertility specifically, the gold standard is kind of your own natural arousal, right? This is all kind of fertility friendly. It's not introducing other compounds, chemicals, this sort of thing. Now, of course, if you can't have sex without that, of course, that's different if there's pain involved. So I'm not saying forego it completely. I just want people to start thinking about everything they're putting down there and how a lot of it's stripping out sort of this delicate ecosystem that is there, these microbiota that's there to support you, literally. So you
Right.
reduce inflammation to keep your immune reactivity balanced. And if it's completely out of balance, again, vaginal microbiome has very strong data in terms of pregnancy outcomes. It's wild. So it's like this environment is here for you. It's here to support you. We can at least support it by not trying to strip out this entire ecosystem. We can support it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm always talking about on this podcast too, is I think we are just kind of unconsciously moving through the day every day and not fully thinking about all of the ways or all of the things that we're putting in our body, that we're around or surrounded by, that we're taking in general, just in our environment. And so is the point to really trying to balance out all of these ecosystems and microbiome systems just to make sure that our bodies are in the optimal place for conceiving or fertility journeys or just health in general.
Yeah, and it is for health in general, to be very clear. So
Yeah.
even if someone's like listening and like they're like, I'm not trying to like conceive, or like maybe they already did, this is very relevant for women's health sort of by each decade. Right. In
Yeah.
practice, I think I'm working with women in their 50s and 60s and 70s, and we're all of these conversations actually still have relevance. It's just towards a different goal. Why is that the case? Like, how is this fertility related to this? It's because, again, we're addressing a root cause, and that has relevance no matter what the goal is. So, yes, and I don't want anyone to feel kind of overwhelmed by, we have to support this and do this and do this. It's not a to-do list. I just want people to take a step back and think, how can we support the life in our body? Because
Mm.
it will then better support us in our health
Yeah.
goals.
Yeah. That makes so much sense to me. Okay. Well, I know you're a dietitian, so I have to talk about food in relation to fertility. Are there specific foods we should be eating to balance hormones? To if someone is trying to conceive, like how do we learn about those kind of pieces of this puzzle?
Yeah, and this is actually something that I take probably, I mean, dare I say, even like a wildly different approach compared to
Okay.
my colleagues and compared to probably what you find on Google. So to set the stage, it's like what do we know? What do most people know? It's that, well, a Mediterranean diet's pretty healthy, right,
Right.
for fertility, despite the fact that not a lot of people eat that pattern at all. And what does that even entail? nor is it personalized at all. And even in research, like all the definitions are different. So we kind of have like, we have this Mediterranean diet aspect. What else do we have? We have, you know, thousands of articles at this point saying like, eat these 10 foods for fertility, right?
Yeah.
Or avoid these 10 foods. Okay. So, I practice that. I do not practice any of that whatsoever. And if we're deducing sort of down nutrition and this
Mhm.
like amazing substance that you're putting in your body that has the capacity to support all of your cells, like we aren't doing sort of a list of 10. And that's not against sort of tactical takeaways. Again, like that's what the entire book is. But we are going to optimize the diet based off of what we're trying to optimize. So far, we discussed the microbiome. So let's just kind of like double click on that even further. One of those ecosystems is the gut. We know how to support the gut by doing things like eating ideally at least 30 different plant foods a week. That's going to support the diversity in the gut. So diversity of plants, diversity of gut. We also know that it's beneficial to have prebiotic sources of fiber. So that's like fertilizer for your good gut microbes. So again, we want to feed those guys well because they're producing anti-inflammatory molecules for us, right?
Mm.
For our body, right?
Right.
It's wild. So there's that. There's other things that you can do to support the gut microbiome. Like you might be able to introduce a small amount of fermented foods. That's been shown
Mm.
beneficial. Like, so again, all of these, I'm painting really broad strokes here because in practice we go ultra personalized, right? That's one way to kind of support the ecosystem in a very non-nuanced way. There's about 100 nuances we could get into if we want, but let's just leave it broad strokes for now. That can be kind of how you support the ecosystem. But how the heck do you personalize this? Well, you can start using sort of your body's signals that are available to you every day, right? And one of which is your bowel movements. If things are really off, Kelly, that tells us there's something off with the system or what you're putting in to this amazing system of a body that you have. So it's like we can kind of start personalizing the food
Mhm.
based off of that. So again, all of this, you're like, what the heck? We just talk about food in relation to microbiome, not a fertility. But let me connect this entire picture real fast.
Okay.
The gut microbiome is related to fertility because number one, like we discussed with oral vaginal, it directly impacts inflammation. This also directly impacts circulating levels of hormones. This impacts our immune system functioning. All of these are fundamental to supporting fertility. I know from at least some doctors and online, you're like, everyone says the goal, it's like the goal is to lower inflammation in
Right.
the body. But like, what the heck does that even mean? How do you even
Right.
go about that?
Right.
This is one of the reasons of like how you actually go about that. And so hopefully that connects like the little dots we discussed, but also the big picture of like why we're doing what we're doing. I'm all about the why. That's how we empower more women about their bodies and about their health.
Absolutely. What are some of the sneakiest fertility disruptors? I mean, I actually think we've talked about a couple, one being the oral hygiene and all of that. But are there any other sneaky ones that people might not be thinking of, but they're really participating in every day of their lives?
Oh my gosh, I think there's so many. Kind of
Okay.
depends on the path that you want to go
Okay.
down right now. So I'll ask you a question.
Okay.
What interests you? Like, does metabolic health interest you? Does kind of these environmental toxins interest you? Like, what is kind of we can go down so many paths right
Gosh,
now.
all of them interest me. I think knowing about just base level ways that we can make sure that our body is like a good holding space, I guess.
Yeah, that no,
That
it's a
would be,
beautiful way to put
yeah,
it.
maybe the first thing that I would be interested in.
One of them that's very, very important, and I look into with every single client is your blood sugar. So this plays
Mm.
into metabolic function overall.
Okay.
So if this is really sort of misaligned with our goal, it can it can be somewhat of a blocker to get pregnant. And if it's not, and you still do get pregnant, it can increase your risk of having a lot of these conditions while pregnant. You've heard of these like gestational diabetes, right?
Yeah.
Gestational
Hmm.
hypertension, which is high
Hmm.
blood pressure. There are some reasons why you can develop these, and that's completely out of our control. But there's a lot of it within our control. So that's what I'm trying to focus on right now. But if we improve our metabolic health and how our body is fundamentally handling the food that we eat, it's also going to improve the system overall for our chances of getting pregnant. So in terms of blood sugar control, this goes back to kind of what you think it is. It's making sure your body is functioning, taking in food, being able
Hmm.
to process that food, convert it to energy, right? Kind of all goes back to this. And so that's certainly one aspect that I think is so not appreciated. It's not discussed in
Not
context
at
of
all.
fertility. I looked into this a lot, and all the research is there, but it's not being translated into the public, and this is a huge lever that we have in our favor.
That's interesting to me because I've had multiple either holistic practitioners or doctors talk to me about my blood sugar levels. And I don't even eat a lot of sugar, but I think it's something with how my body processes food. And now that you're saying it is connected to fertility, I'm like, I wonder if that was part of my stuff too. I have no idea. But like, how does that play into our fertility?
I would say so the blood sugar is so what your doctors might be pointing out. Well, I mean, if you're seeing someone who's like sort of holistic and functional medicine
Mm-hmm.
based, I would assume that it's not just the level of blood sugar that you're looking at. They're probably looking at something what's called a glycosylated hemoglobin. It's basically how much sugar is like stuck to your red blood cells. So you
Okay.
would want to look at that as well. You would want to look at insulin. So basically, how much of this hormone is your pancreas pumping out to get that sugar from your bloodstream into your cells, right? To be
Uh,
utilized for energy. What we're really wanting to avoid and or correct
mhm.
is something called insulin resistance, which just think of it as like there's this hormone and your cells are not responding as well as it could to
Okay.
that hormone. So then your ability to, again, take in sugar, like nutrients from the bloodstream, is impacted as well. Why the heck do we care about this for
Mhm.
fertility? It's because if there's a problem, with that signaling, it's more of a root cause problem that there might be more inflammation
Mhm.
in your body. There might be more oxidative stress in your body. And kind of going back to the microbiome, these are the things that we want to avoid or correct, or heck, use them as an opportunity to optimize.
Yeah. So you mentioned stress, and that's another thing I've been thinking about a lot because you also talked about the women that you were seeing at the beginning being these high achieving, kind of successful women. So there's obviously usually an amount of stress that comes with that, maybe lack of sleep. So, what are those two pieces of the puzzle as far as like stress and sleep and taking care of our body and creating this environment that's a good hosting spot for a fertility? So how did those things play into it?
With stress, the first thing that I think about is uh, if you're kind of living your life full of stress, or in another way, you can think about it, you're living in this sympathetic state. It's kind of like fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
How that is, and if our goal is to get to a state where we're trying to create something, meaning we want to operate from a place of abundance, right? it- those are completely conflicting sort of energetics. You know this, and you could probably speak to this. It's like that is going to sort of cloud the goal we have. Then everything feels much harder. You're
Mm-hmm.
more overwhelmed. I'm not even going to touch the sleep aspect for a second, but just think about sort of these emotions that you're balancing and how you're pursuing the goal. One, it's going to be very cloudy. You're going to be very reactive. You're coming from a place, you're doing these changes out of a place of anxiety. And because
Mm-hmm.
you feel like you're constantly behind, right? You're behind the clock on anything, advanced maternal age, so on and so forth. So that's why you're making changes, but that is not sustainable, nor do I want anyone to make changes from that state. So
Okay.
if we're really stressed out, that just is an opportunity to drop back into what is our goal? What are we trying to pursue? And are we trying to get there from a place of, you know, clarity? And like, what signals are we sending to ourselves? Like, all of these things really, really matter. Did you feel that the stress that you experienced during kind of your journey, and like, how did you overcome that? Is what I'm saying making sense in terms of like, yeah, when I'm super overwhelmed, like stressed out of my mind doing all this, I certainly don't have clarity of thought about my goal and what I'm pursuing, and I'm present in the moment, because that's not possible, right?
Right.
Having like this bucket of emotions and this bucket of emotion. What was your feelings like? What was your life experience that you
Yeah,
were?
I mean, I think for me, when I look back, I'm thinking, well, no wonder it didn't work because I was under so much stress and traveling a lot. Like my body was under a lot of stress. It was a stress I was accustomed to, so I don't know that it like stood
It
out to
was your
me at the
normal,
time.
right?
Yes. But when this process for me did not go the way that I wanted it to go, it was the first time I think I had to take a step back and really start to evaluate my lifestyle and the amount of fight or flight I was living in constantly, the level of burnout that I had, just not really fully being conscious of the impact that my lifestyle was having on my physical health, emotional health, and mental health. I mean, they're all connected, but it was just more of a survival mode that I was living in because I was building so much in business. And then truthfully, it probably wasn't the right time for me to try these fertility things, but that what didn't feel like a choice. It felt like, oh God, time is running out. So that's adding more stress because it's just like the clock is ticking, the go, 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 you've got it. So it's kind of interesting that we just think that we can will ourselves to get to this place of fertility. And it was a big lesson for me of like, hey, there's a lot that I can't just control or will myself to do physically with this situation. If does that make
What did
sense how I just said that?
are
Okay.
you kidding me? Completely. And I mean, heck, you are not alone. There's so many
Yeah.
who that is going to deeply resonate with exactly what they're experiencing. And so it's wonderful that you are so open to talking about this, because we need to have this discussion as women. And guess what? The goal isn't to like, quit your job and go on
Sure.
vacation,
Right.
right? It's like, no, 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 not at all. But
Right.
so afterwards, I mean, did you like, was this weeks afterwards, months afterwards, a year afterwards that you were like, did you feel like you had built up kind of more of a resilience because of all of this? Like, what is your perspective on this now? Like
Uh,
reflecting back.
Um, yes, I think well for me it was twofold because the pandemic happened right after this experience for me. So it was like I was forced to
Oh yeah,
slow
you
down.
are forced to
Yes, like
like,
it was very much the time of like I was sent into reflection. And so then I was able to have a different perspective that I might not have been able to had the world not slowed down at that time. But I think looking back, yeah, it definitely is like it has taught me a lot about myself in that I'm very resilient. I am very driven. I will work very hard at the things that I want. I don't think I had prioritized this in the way that that looking back, if this was something that I really wanted in my life, I would have done differently. I feel very content in where I am now and just like, okay, in this lifetime, that's not part of my journey. That's okay. But there was a lot of grief tied to it. And there was a big emotional component for me of feeling unworthy and less than as a woman because you think, as a woman, this is the one thing I'm supposed to be able to do. And look, I've gotten all these accomplishments in my life, and this is the one I could not do. And I felt like deficient. There was like a big piece of, yeah, just feeling like not good enough or worthy enough for it. And so I really had to sit with that for a while and appreciate and start to really build an appreciation for my body separate from this because it felt like, why aren't you doing this? I was just frustrated. And like I said, it was this thing where I've always willed myself to get to the places I've wanted to get before that. And this wasn't one that I could do that with. And so it was really this like, okay, I had to sit with my body, appreciating it for the beauty that it still held and all that it does do on a daily basis that I think we forget all that our body does. And then, yeah, just really reflecting back on what I would do differently if this was a priority for my life. Like if this was something I really truly was passionate about and desperately felt like I wanted, I would have taken a step back from a lot of the stress and the work that I was going through. But again, like I said, I didn't really realize how stressed I was at the time until the pandemic made me stop and go, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this
Well,
is
I mean,
this is a slowdown. This is what that looks like.
I have to say, well, there's kind of two comments. One, I think it's amazing that you have arrived to a space where even though like you recognize and you're saying like, oh, well, it's actually not part of my journey
Yeah.
right now. It's actually incredible that you're still willing to talk to me about a goal that you know affects other women. I mean,
Mm.
it's so selfless of you. And it's just kind of, I mean, I did
Oh,
want to point
thank
that out
you.
because I'm like, wow, right? Like just because it wasn't your path, you're like, yeah, but it could be some people's paths and we want to kind of
Yeah,
optimize their body. And hopefully with this book too, I mean, look, I hope you got some takeaways as well. Again, this is applicable
absolutely.
for women's health, but
Yeah.
so that's one component. The second that I was kind of thinking about, it's almost like not only did you have to sit with the emotions, it's basically forcing you to broaden your idea of self-worth. Because like you said, it's like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm supposed to like do this as a female, as a woman.
Mhm.
But it does kind of force you into doing that, which is not a bad thing, I think, for any woman, because, you know, I guarantee if you don't do that, kind of broaden your sense of self-worth and sort of value and purpose in life, life will absolutely find a way to keep like slapping you in the face with difficulties until you figure it out, right? Until you
100%.
figure out a different mindset and philosophy by which to move forward. So yeah, that was kind of interesting. And I guess one other thing is I I- this is very, very hard to appreciate in the moment. Like you said, like there's no way that you could be speaking about this when you were sitting with the emotions, right? It's kind of
Oh,
like very narrow focus, like that is your world.
yeah.
However, I have the opportunity for people like coming into office or us having this conversation right now to just remind them it's like I have them think about a woman that they deeply respect and admire.
Mhm.
So not just like an actress because she's super famous on like the, you know, the movies, like just a woman that's like, oh my God, she's really, really incredible. There has not been one time that someone has told me that they respect that individual and look up to that individual because she had a child, right? So like think about that in terms of
Right.
self-worth and what you're capable of,
Yeah.
and everything you get to do in this life. Like, sure, maybe you value because she has a big family and she can balance sort of like X, Y, and Z. You probably like that attribution, right? But it's not because like she had a baby. Think about that.
Right. It's true. And also, why don't we look at that? Like, why? I kind of it really, with this fertility conversation, when it wasn't just going like very smoothly, like I expected it to, I started to really appreciate the fact that babies are born every single day, like multiple times. How intricate this whole process is. Like, we don't really talk about the respect, or we don't talk about fertility and pregnancy and having a child with the respect that I think it deserves, because there are actually so many things that can go wrong. And the fact
Oh, and
that,
everything has to go right. Like
yes,
millions of things
have
have
to
to go
go
right.
right. And then it just happens and we go, oh, someone had a baby. And it's like, no, that's a miracle that that happened. And it's a beautiful thing that bodies can ever do that in general. I just walked away with so much more respect for that whole process. And also, when you're talking about the self-worth piece, I think that it's important to talk about those pieces as a woman, because I would imagine that carries on into motherhood as well, and just the balancing of life and work and, motherhood, all of those pieces. I think I went through a piece of that, um, kind of.
That's going to serve you, you know, later in life,
Sure.
whether you're a mom or not. And again, a mom that can have multiple definitions. It
And that
doesn't
does in my life for
necessarily.
sure. Yes.
We don't even need to go down that path. But
Yeah.
that can have so many definitions and how it looks. But when you are taught sort of resilience and to go through these hard things, let's say if you didn't do that, I mean, how are you going to transmit that to children? Or other people in your life if you don't have sort of that resilience, right? So I just think all of this does kind of transfer to other humans that you spend time with, and that's a beautiful thing as well.
Yeah. Well, there's so many pieces of it, like we said, that can go right or wrong. And I think what you're talking about is so important about just creating an environment of health in general. And like we've said in the book, Trying, which comes out in January, by the way, there's so much about building, there's all these tangible takeaways, which I love to give the listeners, but there's just so much about building the environment to support not only your health for the baby, but also your health for yourself. And I know as I move into my 40s, hormones and all of those conversations are, menopause, that's all coming up. And so this matters for that too. Is there anything else that you would say you want listeners just to walk away with, whether they're trying right now to have a baby, or if it's something they want in their future, or if they've already gone through the process? Like, why is this an important conversation to you?
Yeah, well, what first point, when you talk about, it's whether it's perimenopause, menopause, kind of thinking about those transitions too. Again, I'm not saying like, oh, well, you should still get my fertility book, but I do want to point out that if you're really looking for just a root cause approach to
Yeah.
health, that gives you like hundreds of tangible takeaways. And I think what kind of comes to mind when you said that is, these this environmental component, these kind of microplastics, endocrine disrupting chemicals. So there's research on how sort of your exposure to this and your collective sort of cumulative exposure to this, that can sort of accelerate the process of reproductive aging. So they even found, I'll just gonna give you one tidbit of other
Yeah.
information, that the women who had the highest exposure entered into menopause 4 years earlier, which is mind blowing. So again, this stuff has relevance because it's affecting our physiology. So just put that in the back of your
Oh,
mind
that's
that this stuff is so
fascinating.
important to protect your body. And I just hope if I achieve one thing, it's that one woman can go into the journey that so many experience, like you experience, and actually have that deep empowerment, and also have that deep respect of like self-worth and confidence. That's what I want for every woman then, and really throughout her lifetime. The one thing that I want people to take away, because yeah, I'm all about the tangible takeaways too, but I won't give you one. I'll just say that there's always more than one path to accomplish the goal. And if you are not seeing that, it just means you're locked in to one version of reality, whether that's based off of comparison to your peers, which is a thief of joy anyway,
Yes.
or whether that's based off of societal expectations. That is living inside of a box. And I just want, that's really kind of my last takeaway for everyone is don't live in that restricted mindset.
I fully support that as the takeaway. I love that because I think all of us are so individual. And to me, this conversation about overall health in general is something that I want everyone to feel empowered by, not disempowered. So, again, the book is called Trying, a science-backed plan to optimize your fertility. I'll put a link for you guys to go pre-order. It comes out in January. Rachel, where else can people keep up with you if they want to follow along on your journey?
Yeah, I have a website, so rachelswanson.com. And, Kelly, I'm always behind the scenes. Like that's where I like to be, just one-to-one with people. But I will become more social with this whole book launch, or else my publishers might be very upset at me. So my Instagram is at RachelsRx. So I'll be posting a lot more there as well.
Amazing. Again, I'll put all of that in the description of this podcast for you guys. Thank you so much for being here and having this conversation with me.
Thank you, Kelly. I mean, you're just a beautiful soul. So thank you for inviting me in and talking about this.
Thank you so much for listening.